What are the things that matter when you're setting up your camera? Can your shots look any better? They can always look better, which is why we're still learning after at least 150 years of doing this. Let's take a look at the best practice for setting up a shoot on your phone or a mirrorless DSLR like the A7 Mark III here. Oh, and by the way, if you're only interested in one of those options, then you can find all the info you need in the timestamps in the description. The lighting setup for both of these is going to be the same. If you're filming using natural light, get yourself over near a window and film side onto the window so the light is filling your face. It may be too bright if it's in the middle of the day, so if there's curtain or netting, you might want to pull that across. Turn off the overhead lights as these are often a weird color and they also create unnatural shadows under your eyes and nose. And if this makes the background too dark, throw in some other lights to spot some areas of interest and reveal more about the space you're in. On a phone or DSLR, the automatic settings are going to play havoc with your skin tones if those areas of interest are lit with a different, warmer, more yellow color temperature to daylight, especially if you're quite close to them. See if you can get yourself as far away from any background lights as possible if they're not bluish daylight colors. A good 3 or 4 meters would be ideal. Otherwise, set up your subject lights, you being the subject, obviously. If you're not using daylight, because let's face it, you might only be able to film at night due to your schedule, or because you don't want to be waiting for the light outside to be not so bright, you'll want light on either side of your camera to light you evenly. There's some very filmic and gangster looking setups where you can do one light on one side, but be careful, it can easily get too severe for YouTube. You really want an even light, which is both more flattering and looks more open and inviting. Yes, you can do this with regular desk lamps, but just be aware that they might have that yellow color I talked about just before. These tungsten or 3200K bulbs will need to be replaced by daylight or 5600K lights. Otherwise, it's going to make your skin tones look a bit jaundiced, unless you set your camera to a matching 3200K. You will find that desk lamps like this need to be a lot closer to your face than dedicated video lighting, so if your face looks dark, pull them in a bit more. The other option is to get a ring light like the Yumnuo here and film through it. Make sure whatever ring light you get is at least 18 inches wide, otherwise it's going to be really hard to film because the light gets in your eye line, it's blinding. This is a much simpler, quicker setup for a first-time studio if you can get used to the ring light being in your face. There's a separate video on filming with a ring light, hopefully there's a link around here somewhere. For the mic setup, the latest and best solution for new YouTubers is the Rode Wireless Go system. It's a tiny wireless pack that clips onto your shirt that can work either with a phone using the appropriate adapter for your smartphone or via a jack plug into your DSLR. You can buy a separate lav mic and cable it to the transmitter in your pocket, but out of the box it comes with a built-in mic on the transmitter itself, so you don't have to. If you're doing that, make sure you clip it to yourself in reverse so it only shows the clip and not the glossy, distracting frontage. The clip on each device is a clever bit of gear and can be used on a cold shoe mount on phone rigs and on top of DSLRs. The device is really out of the box, so just plug and play. There'll be a full review on the Rode Go later, so stay tuned for that. Although there are a few reviews out there already, so we'll forgive you if you stray off onto another channel. I mean, we only spend months of our lives doing this for nothing, so why not just abandon us? But subscribe first so you get the review later as well. On the actual camera setup, let's start with the phone. The first thing is you're going to need a tripod or grip of some sort. Being handheld or leaned against some books will get old pretty quick, and it's also vulnerable to being dropped or slipping off that position. Get a cheap tripod and grip at the very least, or I'd go a step further and get the Ulanzi Rig Pro. Why they call it the Pro when it's the only version, I don't know, but it's like 12 quid. And it just lets you add things to your phone or move about with it easily and generally treat it like a camera rather than the delicate bit of telecommunication that it is. Best thing is that if you drop it or knock it over, your phone will be fine. There's a further review on this bit of kit coming soon too. Next, although you can use the native camera in any smartphone, I'm going to recommend that you download Filmic Pro, which is again about 12 quid, and this will give you a bit more control over all those automatic settings in your phone's camera. Use the interlocking coloured rings icon to set your colour temperature to 5600, and the A or B ought to give this locked already for you as a default. Once you've got that set, use the 2 red icons to set up focus and aperture. Get someone to model for you in the shot, move the red ring to their face and then click once till it turns white. It will also select the right aperture and again back to red to lock it. Do the same with the square, which will focus for you. You're set up to go on your phone. For the A7, and these are the same principles for most DSLRs, you ought to get used to the manual settings. I know the fully automatic settings are there, but the basics are easy and you'll get more reliable setup and a better result from using the manual settings. Having said that, if you've got a solid face recognizing autofocus like Sony and Canon do, then keep that on. First of all, find the color temperature setting. The default is AWB, auto white balance. You want to turn this off. That usually means switching to another choice. Either choose 5600K, or if that's not a choice on some camcorders, choose the daylight symbol. Keep in mind, everything else we've talked about has been daylight for your set, so this will match it. Now the lens. Set your lens aperture to the most wide open that it has. If your lens is a 24 to 105 f4, then f4 is wide open even if it goes all the way to 12. It's counterintuitive, but basically the smaller the number, the larger the hole in the lens, which lets in more light and gives the image a depth of focus that is better for framing faces. Let's not get too bogged down in the lens stuff. The main thing is that the smaller the number on your lens, either 3.5, 2.8, or even f1.8 and below, the better you'll look because everything behind you will be out of focus. This is why the 50mm lens is so popular. You can usually pick one up for under £100 and it's very sharp at f1.8. Although your camera has to be back a bit more than a wider lens like 24mm, it looks amazing. Next, let's say you've got a lovely sharp lens like the 1.8. It's probably going to be too sharp for portraiture when it's wide open at f1.8 because it could mean your ears are in focus but your nose and eyes aren't. Yes, it's that sharp, but set it there to start with. The first thing that happens when your lights are set up and you set your lens wide open is that the image will likely blow out and be overexposed. First, make sure your ISO is all the way down to the minimum of 100. If it's still looking too bright, you've got a few choices in the recommended order. 1. Stop down to at least 2.8. This will likely solve the focal depth issue so that your whole face and head is all in focus at the same time. Also, the camera will be taking in a bit less light, so it may well solve the exposure problem as well. Number 2, dim your lights till it looks good. Of course, that's not always possible if they're not dimmable. You could add number 3, an ND filter to your lens if you have one, or number 4, you can crank up the shutter speed, but this one isn't ideal over about 200, so hopefully you don't need to push that one up too much. The other problem you could have is if your lens is an f4 or f5, is that it could make the set too dark. This can happen if your lights are dimmed too much, too far away, or just not strong enough. Pretty simple. Get those lights closer, turn them up if possible, move over to a window and use more daylight, or just crank up the ISO a notch or two. If all of that seems too hard, then yes, use the fully automatic settings rather than not getting started. But once you've made a few videos, give these steps above a try and see if you can improve the look of your videos. If that's got you started, check out this playlist for a full review on the apps you can use for shooting and editing on your phone. And if you haven't already, why not subscribe and start with our YouTube channel growth strategy playlist and become part of our channel growing tribe.